Hello friends and foes of Middle-earth and welcome back. Today we break down episode 2 of The Rings of Boredom. Sorry, The Rings of Power. The most interesting thing is how many hate comments and dislikes I'll get this time. Before we begin, I want to make it very clear that I'm not simply hating on this series. Instead, I'd rather say I'm disappointed with it. I think it had huge potential, but that Amazon took a lot of bad decisions down the road. Anyway, as I said in the last review, I've mainly been shocked by how boring the series is. These reviews are mainly for your entertainment, and a fine way to mention some of the minor lore often overlooked. I don't really regard it as a Tolkien show, as it's so loosely based on the lore and Tolkien's works. But I think, even as a fantasy series, the storytelling and pacing really drags down the whole show. Maybe it will be better in the later episodes. I hope so. Just like the last review, I'll discuss some of the major things in episode 2, both good and bad, and then end with a score for story, acting, visuals, music, and so on. So let's jump right into it and review episode 2. If you make it through the 3 minutes long intro without falling asleep, you're in for a treat. Even more sleep. I wish I was only joking, but don't watch this if you're really sleepy. And if you can hold your breath for another minute, you might make it to the first line. It sure looks more like a comedy than something you're meant to take serious. But alright, I guess I'm just a hater. It still bothers me greatly that they keep calling Elenor for Nori. Couldn't they have come up with a better name, not already used in The Hobbit? I get that they're trying to be funny here, but I didn't laugh. Did you? I feel they're making Elenor a female Frodo, a character chosen by fate to do something they don't really want to do, but they must do the right thing. Sounds like they were very inspired, at least. I'm not a fan of the Harfoots, but if you make it through the 7 minutes, yet another storyline takes place. A very, very exciting one. Arondir and Bronwyn in Before-Dor. They wander around in the ruins of Hodern, some made-up village. And of course they find the secret cave within 2 minutes, without obstacles. We get some cheesy dialogue between them and zero romance. Or maybe I can't see it. At this point it would be a good time to pause and think, what are the characters doing and why? I'm quite confused. I think it would have made more sense that Arondir asked the other elves for help to investigate this cave. But no, let's not give them any more screen time. They already got like 5 seconds each. And then we get to Ost-in-Edhil, the capital of Eregion. Apparently that name was too hard, or they just called the city the same as the realm, just like the last episode where the capital of Linden is called Linden. I hope you can see the issue here. But yeah, Ost-in-Edhil is not named in the appendices, so I guess they can't use that. I just find that very ironic. Do you know why? Well, it's the place that the Rings of Power were forged. I wonder how many episodes we have to watch before we actually see a Ring of Power. Even one of the lesser ones, perhaps. Maybe it's too much to ask for in season 1. Some people have said that the city doesn't really match the lore. Well, the river is right, but the cliff is not something mentioned. So overall, I'd say it's quite alright. Without doubt, one of the more lore-accurate locations in the show. Are all elves going to be around waterfalls, by the way? Is that some sort of fetish? We finally get to hear about Feanor and some of the lore. It's quite clear they don't have enough rights to give us the lore we all want to hear. But I really think they should try to avoid that altogether, if they can't do it right. The hammer is alright, but I was more impressed with these drawings. It looks very much like something made by Alan Lee. Anyway, let's get back to the hammer. I feel it's worth mentioning that hammer created the Silmarils, and it's also responsible for Elrond and his brother being orphans after the third kinslaying, where their mother Elwing had to flee. So in a way, that hammer is sort of responsible for a lot of bad things in Elrond's life. I mean, he and his twin brother Elros were left to die by the 2 remaining sons of Feanor, until Maglor changed his mind. Of course, we as a casual viewer don't know anything about that. And sorry. Nor do I get that impression by this scene. I feel the dialogue sort of tries to nod to that, but it's a bit too vague, in my opinion at least. I also think the message could have been conveyed in a more meaningful way, where we could see a flashback of Elrond's past or something like that. But again, right issues. I think it was a big mistake by Amazon to try and cover the Second Age when they barely got the rights to anything from the First Age. I will talk more about that in another video though. Okay, again, sorry, but the storytelling makes no sense to me. Elrond is sent with Celebrimbor to help him with his work. Celebrimbor then reveals he needs a lot of workers to build him this new tower with the mighty forge. He says gil-galad can't send the needed workers, so he sent Elrond to do what exactly? Get the idea to ask the dwarves 5 seconds later, just like we see it? It doesn't really work, does it? Here's another idea. Why couldn't gil-galad and Celebrimbor simply have discussed this in the last episode, and then Elrond could have interrupted and come up with the idea? I think that would have worked just slightly better. There's something off here for me, and it's quite clear they just wanted them to go to Eregion so we know about another location. Oh, by the way, why did they place the city the wrong place on the map? I mean, they already made a map, which was accurate. I mean, it took them 2 attempts, and now they make it wrong again. So Elrond and Celebrimbor goes to Moria, or rather Khazad-dûm, before the cool gate is made, of course. There's a nice little reference to Gimli's line from The Lord of the Rings, but why do all conversations between characters feel so off? They rarely look at each other, or just face each other as you normally do in a conversation. I think there's a bit too much of it in the show, but maybe that's just me. I think it's good and interesting that they try to develop the culture of the dwarves, but I think the idea of endless hammering of stone felt rather pointless and boring. I don't feel that's the best idea they could come up with. I will say though that it's quite clear that the show tried to focus a lot on languages, dialects and so on. And I think that's pretty interesting and also very good. I'm not a huge fan with all the accents, both Irish and Scottish, but guess it's alright. I would have used slightly less Elvish though. I feel it sort of scares away new viewers that are unfamiliar with the world, but that's just my opinion of course. As I mentioned in one of my older videos, I think the idea of using mirrors is quite an interesting idea for Khazad-dûm, but I don't really buy the grass growing inside the mountain. What on earth is this costume? I think someone smoked a little too much Old Toby while designing this. I just find the stranger incredibly uninteresting. Maybe it's just me. I mean, surely he has magical powers, but I don't really care. And them eating snails didn't help for sure. This looks like Gandalf's rune mirrored, but I still hope and believe it's someone else. Likely someone evil that will harm the Harfoots in some way. So if you hate them like I do, I guess we can look forward to that. And after 25 minutes, this is the most dramatic moment in this episode. Yeah, it takes 1 second. Ah, yes. Galadriel swimming in some random direction for a day. Seems plausible. I wonder if the plot somehow will save her and bring her to the next milestone in her story. And look what we have here. A raft. How convenient. The magical dagger that only appear when you need it. We will all look like this by the end of season 1. And then one of the big law inaccuracies happens. A sail appear and one of the men thinks it's the corsairs. But Galadriel says, no, it's not corsairs. And no, it couldn't be, because Umbar wasn't even founded before the Rings of Power were forged. Actually, the corsairs of Umbar is a late Third Age thing. They are a mixture between Black Númenóreans and the Haradrim. So that's one of the mistakes that make me shake my head. Anyway, this gigantic sea monster attacked the raft, but yes, you guessed it, only Halbrand and Galadriel make it out. Somehow these people fled from Befordor and all the way here. Why? How? I guess we're not supposed to ask questions. Maybe they wanted to find Númenor and start a new life. I got no idea and it's not lore accurate at all. None of it makes sense to me. I do think the idea with the sea monster is interesting, but again, nothing is at stake. Because we all know Galadriel won't die. I guess I have to say that sentence in every episode. Anyway, Elrond gives up and then we have a little chat on an elevator. Yeah, I'm not a fan of that. They do explore an interesting concept though. That the elvish mortality makes them have a different sense of time. And this conversation between Durin and Elrond have already become the most interesting part in this entire show. Elrond then gets to meet Durin's wife Disa, and we find out who's the real boss in the house. Now for the 3rd time in this episode, some dwarf uses the expression by Aulë's beard. I think that's an interesting nod to the lore, as Aulë did indeed create the 7 fathers of the dwarves. I just have one issue. You see, the dwarves didn't actually call him Aulë, they called him Mahal. That's the coastal name for him. But yes, again, right issues. The name only appears in the Silmarillion. I think it's nice that they try to add some lore, but I think it's quite sad at the same time, as every time they try it, they can't get it fully right, because of the rights issues. Oh yeah, and they have 2 children, Gerda and Gamli. Yup, you heard me, Gamli. I guess we shouldn't expect a company like Amazon to come up with creative names. I mean, after all, they stole their name from a rainforest. Pretty interesting helmet with a nod to the dragon helm of Dolomin. But yeah. Durin have been tending a sapling from the tree in Linden, and somehow it managed to grow inside a mountain. As always, don't ask. Apparently all you need is love. Too bad Gondor hadn't invented that tech in the Lord of the Rings. I really hope it's not meant to be a melon tree, as the lore clearly states it didn't grow in Linden. I find it even more unlikely it would grow inside Khazad-dûm. Theo goes crazy on the floor, and boy oh boy, it's an orc. An incredibly overpowered orc. But don't worry, his mother saves him. Hardly a surprise to anyone. Girl power, I guess. It was quite nice to add some horror elements to the scene. It actually created a bit of tension, at least for a brief moment. Oh yeah, and Arondir gets captured, so that's why we see him in chains in the later episodes. Galadriel almost drowns, but again, say it with me, nothing is at stake, so no one gives a damn. They're simply trying to give us a reason to like Halbrand, but he'll surely be evil in some later episode. Maybe he is Sauron after all, who knows. Could it be a Silmaril in the chest? Let's hope not. Mithril perhaps? Seems more likely and more lore accurate. And Theo's blood suddenly reforges the broken blade. It's basically a Morgul blade with Uno reverse magic. Yeah, pure evil. And the episode ends with Halbrand and Galadriel being found by Elendil and his crew. So yes, in episode 3 we will see Numenor, or rather Amazon's Numenor. But let's hand out some points. Story, 3 out of 10. Overall, I think episode 2 was better, at least in some ways, but it still suffered from very slow pacing, and I felt characters pretty much teleported around the map. There's a bit too many characters, too many places, not doing much really. I do feel there's some setups being made though, and I think the friendship between Durin and Elrond is going to be some of the most interesting parts in the coming episodes, and one of the few things I want to know more about actually. Lore, 1 out of 10. I have to give it 1, sorry. If I were to mention everything lore accurate in this episode, it can be done fairly quickly. Yes, sea monsters exist, but they don't actually board the rights to any of the books that mention it, but still. Ost-in-Edhil looked fairly accurate, but was wrong on the map and they couldn't really name it that, so... Oh, and if it is Mithril in the chest, then yes, the dwarves at this time mined Mithril in Khazad-dûm, and the elves of Eregion were very interested in that material. Anything else lore accurate? Actually not. It was pretty much just non-canon characters taking over this episode. It may seem like an unfair score, but really, they got 2 things right and only sort of. And the last thing is just a guess. I feel I'm quite generous to give it 1 and not 0. Cinematography, 6 out of 10. I think in the second episode, we had a handful of more interesting shots. One thing that really improved the score was this whole horror element with the orc inside the House of Bronwyn. I think that was an interesting and nice little thing to add. It did feel a little out of place, especially if we compare it to the ridiculous moments with the Harfoots. I'm not amazed, but yet again, nor do I feel it was totally awful. Visuals, 6 out of 10. For visuals, I think it was a little less spectacle than last episode, but I actually appreciated that. I think Ost-in-Edhil and Khazad-dûm looked fine for what it is. It's still very gamey to me, and if someone told me it was from an upcoming game, I'd believe them, because I can't really see the difference anymore. I think the scene with Halbrand and Galadriel in the storm was quite well made as well. I guess I paid a little more attention to it because of the article going into detail about it and how it was filmed. All in all, quite alright, but I still feel something is missing, but perhaps it will come, especially in next episode with Numenor. Dialogue, 5 out of 10. I think the dialogue in this second episode was way better than in the last one. I just find it slightly more boring, but rather boring than bad. I would have given 4 if it hadn't been for the little scene with Elrond and Durin on the lift. I think that was one of the only things in this episode actually worth watching. I hope to see more like that, and hopefully something even better, but we'll see. Acting. In the last review I gave the acting a 5, but Eleanor, Poppy and the stranger really dragged it down for this episode. If everyone hadn't been in the episode, I would probably give it a 3 instead. I think Robert Aramayo is one of the better actors in this, and Peter Mullan as Durin III also seems to have potential, but I need to see a little more. I think Prince Durin was alright at times, but there were moments where I think some of the acting was really bad, so I have to end with a 4. Costumes. 2.5 out of 10. That female dwarf armor, or whatever it was, damn, that was bad. This score also includes props though, and I think the hammer of Feanor and the drawings were interesting. I think some of the armor pieces for the dwarves were alright, but I wasn't really amazed. Maybe I didn't spot it, but it really felt like Galadriel just spawns her dagger whenever she needs it. I feel her costume could have been slightly better to actually make it look like she carries her dagger. I feel there were more bad stuff in this episode than in the last one, so I end with the lower score. The music was alright this time. I think the Khazad-dûm track and those last seconds with Elendil were some of the music I noticed the most. It's not like I was blasted down from the couch or anything, so I end with a 6. And that brings us to the final score for episode 2. Some things were better, some things were worse. Especially the lore in this episode really lacked what makes it Tolkien. So that drags it down for me. I think the dialogue was slightly better, but I have to end with a 3, compared to 3.5 in the last episode. But what would you give? Let me know in the comments. Oh yeah, and before someone starts spamming me again, yes, I am fully aware that they do not have the rights for the Silmarillion. Anyway, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe if you liked the video. And maybe you want to watch one of these next? Thank you all for watching and farewell till next time.